My 46 male, septuagenarian father-in-law loves going to our kids' athletic events: football, soccer, baseball, softball, everything. The kids are great athletes and the games are a lot of fun. Father-in-law fits the stereotypical boomer profile: white, Catholic, Republican, Fox News talking points are gospel, and nothing that runs contrary to his beliefs has any merit, no matter how practical or logical. We live a few blocks from he and mother-in-law. We see them regularly, and my mother-in-law is my wife's 40 best girlfriend. Mother-in-law comes over to the house several times every week. Rare is a day these two women don't speak at least once. They have a great relationship. I get frustrated with father-in-law, even as a guy that doesn't get upset about politics. But I love and support wife, and it's important to her that we have a good relationship with her mom and dad. Wife and I say to each other, "Man, he can be a dingaling sometimes. But we want him in our lives and in our children's lives." We have our own flaws and understand that family can be frustrating and that door swings both ways. In the past, we have had issues with father-in-law being overbearing at athletic events. He believes he's being supportive, but he's tone deaf as to how he sounds very critical when offering helpful coaching at games. This past fall, in the middle of the season, our daughter, 9, asked if we could tell father-in-law to not come to soccer games because his coaching, from the sidelines, very loud and grating, was making her uncomfortable. She didn't want to hurt his feelings and wanted us to send the message. When my wife mentioned it to her mom, who then passed it along to father-in-law, and his response, through mother-in-law, was that our daughter would never ask him not to come to games. Well, she did. He seemed to accept that he needs to be more aware of how he comes across to the other players and parents. He sulked for a few weeks, but then got over it, and was granted permission to come to games again after a brief talk about being less of a spectacle. No apologies, no promises to reform, just a harumph, and sure. Here it comes. Basketball season gets going and my daughter's team plays well and makes it to the playoffs. We are all in the gym for a playoff game a few weeks ago, and not even a full quarter into the game, father-in-law is educating a mother from the opposing team on rules of the game. It's abrasive, not informative. It's, "I'm right, you're wrong." He knows he's being argumentative, and he's happy to prove to anyone in earshot how right he is. Things get to the point where the mother is moving seats to put some distance between her and father-in-law. I tap my wife to take her attention away from our daughter playing to let her know that there's a situation. She's sitting on the other side of our group and the noise in the gym is masking the increasing volume of the interaction. Why did I bring it to my wife's attention instead of addressing it myself? Because I have had interactions with father-in-law on this, and other subjects, and my first inclination would be to tell him to SDFU at a volume and tone that would startle adults. As that would not be the best approach to diffuse the situation, my thought was that his grown adult daughter may have more success. We're looking to put water on a brush fire, not napalm. She walks to where he is and politely asks him to let it go, then comes back to sit. A few moments later, not even a full minute, father-in-law is back to educating the other mother. Wife gets up and asks him, more sternly, to knock it off, then returns to her seat. Parents from both teams are looking over to see what the commotion is. It's clear to everyone what's happening. Less than a minute later, he's back at it. Wife goes over again and tells him to stop talking. Father-in-law says, "No, I will not." For some reason this rocked me for 2 reasons. 1, I never heard him speak to his daughter like that before. And 2, I was floored by the lack of respect for his adult daughter and mother to 5 of his grandchildren. Maybe I had been blind to it before, but it was so clear that he would walk over her if his ego was threatened. I was equally enraged and sad. I'd had enough. I lean over, make eye contact with him and say, loud enough to be heard over the basketball game, "Shut your mouth." I'm surprised the F word didn't make it in there. He stops talking, doesn't say a word for the rest of the game. When the game is over, he leaves without a goodbye or congratulations to my daughter for the win. Wife and I know there's going to be blowback, and I'm going to be the bad guy in father-in-law's narrative. I'm okay with that. I can be the crap hole in his fiction, my ego will survive. Wife and I know what happened, and I want father-in-law to know that I'll stand up to anyone that disrespects his daughter, even him. What I'm not okay with father-in-law's treatment of his daughter. I suggest to wife that if father-in-law is ever to come to another game, that 3 things need to happen. 1, father-in-law apologizes to wife. 2, father-in-law will behave at all functions. 3, father-in-law agrees that if anyone ever asks him to stop, he will do so immediately, strangers, coaches, referees. The next day, my wife gets a call from mother-in-law to announce father-in-law's decision on what our punishment will be. He will not come to our house if I'm there, no events where I am present, and he will not be attending Easter Sunday brunch with us. My thought was, wow, you're going to back yourself into a corner here, aren't you? Okay, let's see how you play poker with no chips. Wife tells father-in-law, through mother-in-law because we're children and have to play telephone, that he will not be allowed to attend softball or baseball games if he maintains his position. We haven't had any direct interaction with him in a few weeks. But wife and mother-in-law talk daily. Mother-in-law is saying that father-in-law is her husband and she has to support him. Wife explains that one can support their spouse without supporting every thought, feeling, or action. Mother-in-law is in a bad spot because father-in-law is essentially pushing her to take his side for acting like an ass, otherwise she is not a supportive spouse. Very childlike behavior from a senior citizen. Over this past weekend, I was traveling and get a call from the wife. The Cold War has gone hot. Mother-in-law called to ask what time our daughter's softball games will be this weekend. Wife tells her the times and reminds her that she is welcome, but father-in-law is not. Mother-in-law says, "That's silly, it's been long enough." Wife says, "These are literally the first games this season. He has not missed any athletic events. There have been no consequences for him yet. No, he is not invited." This is where things get dark. Mother-in-law UPS the ante and asks if wife is planning to be at the games. Wife says that she will be, and mother-in-law says, "Then I don't want to go. Your father is wrong for not respecting you, but you need to respect him. I don't want to be around you if you can't respect your father." My heart hurt when I heard this. Wife loves her mother, and they are close friends. Father-in-law is making mother-in-law stand behind his misbehavior, and causing a rift between mother-in-law and wife. Wife says that she's hurt by mother-in-law, but if she wants to hurt feelings, wife will play along. Wife says there will be no contact with our families. Mother-in-law says, "You're not going to keep the grandchildren from us, are you?" Wife, yes. That's where things stand as of today. I'm not sure how this will play out, but I believe father-in-law is about to learn how truly feckless he is. Story 2, entitled Mom Told Me Disabled People Shouldn't Go in Public If We Don't Want to Be Stared At. I, 23 female, am a service dog handler to a red Tri-Aussie. She's a very pretty dog and gains us a lot of attention, so I'm very used to gently educating about why you shouldn't interrupt or distract service dogs. Typically just a, "Hey, please don't distract service dogs," or even telling my dog, but more so just saying out loud, "Ignore it," does the trick. I have a heart condition, POTS for those that know it, that causes me to faint, and she alerts prior to fainting so that I don't fall and get injured or at worst, die. This day, while walking around, I hear cooing and cawing from somewhere nearby, loud enough to be from a good distance, and clearly an adult voice. Out of curiosity, I look around and see a woman, not much older than myself, with a small child no older than 3 in a shopping cart, pointing out my dog. I smiled at them, seeing the kid and not minding the lady at that point. Usually parents point us out to teach their kids about service dogs or to call my dog pretty. I didn't need to go down the aisle they were in, but figured it wouldn't be an issue. As soon as I walked closer, the mom started raising her voice while still baby talking her kid, saying things like, "Oh, look at the puppy coming closer," and, "Isn't that puppy so cute?" Nothing bad, but she was incredibly loud for being right next to me at this point, and her kid wasn't looking. This displeased the mom, so she started to move her cart to force her kid to look at my dog, and I spoke up because she was now blocking where I was trying to go. "Please don't block my path. I'm just trying to shop like anyone else." This lady was not happy with being told this. Without skipping a beat, her face had turned a deep red and she was screaming at the top of her lungs at me in the store. "I am sorry, I just wanted my kid to admire the pretty puppy." And I'll admit, this frazzled me. I wasn't expecting her to turn so angry so quickly, especially since I thought I had been relatively nice in explaining why I didn't want her to move her cart just for her kid to see my dog. I responded along the lines of, "You're more than allowed to look, just please don't block us from shopping. And it's not good to teach kids to point and yell at service dogs, it can distract them from their jobs. If she misses an alert, I could get really hurt." And I get yet another mind-blowing response, the reason I'm making this post. This lady screamed back, now with people watching because we were quite close to the front of the store. "We have eyes, my daughter and I are allowed to look at your dog. If you disabled people are so bothered by being stared at, don't come out in public." I was so shocked at first, I didn't even know how to respond. I eventually just stared at her for a second, silently, before saying, "Wow. I'm so glad people like you are raising kids." Because remember, this happened in front of her small child. I honestly wanted to avoid any more confrontation, so I turned to rush to check out while the mom was busy screaming something else that I ignored. Luckily, she didn't follow and I shared looks of WTF even was that with other people who had seen her outburst. Luckily my dog was unfazed. I gave her extra treats once we left the store, just to reward her for being such a good girl. Story 3. Want your son to have friends? Don't bully a teenager cause they don't have time or money to buy presents. My best friend's mom was in hospital for a few weeks going through some pretty horrific medical issues. He was having to look after himself and his very elderly grandmother at 15. One of our other friends' 16th was coming up. He'd never really had any friends before he met us. He meant well but wasn't very well socialized. He was embarrassing and pretty inappropriate at times. He was about as funny as getting the clap. He would always just retell other people's jokes except worse. Personally, I was mostly friends with him because we had a lot of similar interests rather than his personality. Anyway, my friend obviously didn't have a lot of time or money to get him a present under the circumstances he was dealing with at home. So he took him to the shops on the day and told him he'd buy him any chocolate he wanted. He picked a massive block of dairy milk. Everyone was happy. Everyone except his parents, that is. They said it wasn't a worthwhile gift. I remember being really taken aback. Reminded me more of schoolyard bullies than adults in their 40s raising a teenager, and they weren't understanding when the situation at home was explained to them. They also denounced 2 of our other friends for getting him a joint card, and said I was his only, real friend, because I was the only one to buy a present they deemed good enough, a gift card for the cinema. It became pretty clear where their son's lack of social skills had stemmed from. This was a few years ago, we're all in our early 20s and at university now. But I didn't understand the entitlement and lack of empathy at the time, and I still don't now. These things are never a huge amount of money at that age at the best of times, and the guy frankly had far more important things to be worrying about. We don't see a lot of that friend now, mostly because we're all out there living life now and he's taken a bit of a different path to the rest of us. But his parents definitely haven't helped.